The tears streaming down Olivia Morrison's face felt like they would never stop as she stood before the weathered porch of the only home she had ever known, watching strangers nail a foreclosure notice to the door frame on that scorching July afternoon in 1882. The farm outside Sheridan, Wyoming, had been in her family for 20 years, carved from nothing by her father's calloused hands and her mother's tireless spirit. Both of them were buried on the hillside beyond the wheat fields now, victims of the influenza that swept through the territory 2 winters past. At 22 years old, Olivia had tried everything to keep the land running, to make the payments to the bank, but drought and debt had conspired against her like old enemies reuniting for one final assault. "Miss Morrison, you have until sunset to remove your personal belongings," the banker's assistant said, his voice devoid of sympathy as he adjusted his spectacles. "The property reverts to First National Bank of Sheridan at that time." She wanted to speak, to argue, to scream that this was unjust, but her throat had closed with grief. Instead, she simply nodded and turned away, walking past the barn where her last remaining horse, Clover, stood watching with dark, knowing eyes. The chickens had been sold weeks ago. The cattle before that. Everything had gone piece by piece, and still it had not been enough. The sun beat down mercilessly as Olivia began the hollow task of gathering what little remained of her life. Photographs in cracked frames, her mother's wedding dress wrapped in muslin, her father's rifle, the family Bible with births and deaths recorded in fading ink. Each item felt impossibly heavy as she carried them out to the wagon she had borrowed from the neighbors, the Hendersons, who had watched her struggle with pity but lacked the means to help. By mid-afternoon, exhaustion and heartbreak had driven her to sit on the porch steps one final time. She buried her face in her hands and let the tears come freely, her shoulders shaking with sobs she had held back for months. She did not hear the approach of hoofbeats until they were nearly upon her. Looking up through tear-blurred vision, Olivia saw a man dismounting from a magnificent bay horse. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a dusty black hat that shadowed his face, though she could see the strong line of his jaw and the concern in his dark eyes. His clothes spoke of someone who worked hard but had means beyond the average ranch hand. Leather chaps covered well-made trousers, and his boots, though worn, were of quality craftsmanship. "Pardon me, miss," he said, his voice deep and surprisingly gentle. "I don't mean to intrude, but are you all right?" The question was so absurd given her circumstances that Olivia almost laughed. Instead, a fresh wave of tears came. "Do I look all right?" she managed, her voice breaking. He removed his hat, revealing dark brown hair and a face that was handsome in a rugged, honest way. He appeared to be in his late 20s, with sun-weathered skin and eyes that held genuine kindness. "No, madam, you don't. I'm Vincent Nash. I've been traveling through, looking at properties in the area. Saw the notice on your door. This your place?" "It was," Olivia said bitterly. "Until about 3 hours ago when the bank took it." Vincent looked around the property with an assessing gaze that she recognized from cattle buyers and land speculators. The farmhouse needed paint but was structurally sound. The barn stood straight and strong. The fields stretched out in golden waves, thirsty but not dead. She saw him taking it all in, calculating value while her world crumbled. "How much did you owe?" he asked directly. The personal nature of the question should have offended her, but Olivia was too exhausted to care about propriety. $3,000. Might as well be 3 million. Vincent was quiet for a long moment, turning his hat in his hands. "The bank going to auction it off tomorrow at noon. They said they already have interested buyers." Each word tasted like ash in her mouth. He studied her face with an intensity that made her self-conscious. She knew she must look terrible, red-eyed and dusty, her blonde hair falling from its pins, her simple calico dress stained with sweat and tears. But there was something in his gaze that was not pity exactly, something else she could not name. "What's your name?" Vincent asked. "Olivia Morrison." "Miss Morrison, would you mind showing me around the property? I'm looking to settle in this area, and I'd like to know what I'd be getting if I made an offer at the auction." The request felt like another knife to her heart, but what could she say? At least if someone bought it who would care for it properly, who would tend the land her parents had loved, perhaps that would be some small comfort. "I suppose so," she said quietly, rising on unsteady legs. They walked the property together, as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains. Olivia found herself talking more than she had intended, telling him about her father's careful irrigation system, her mother's vegetable garden, the south pasture that flooded every spring and needed drainage work. Vincent listened intently, asking thoughtful questions that showed he knew farming and ranching. "You ran this place yourself after your parents passed?" he asked as they stood by the fence line overlooking the wheat fields. "I tried. I had hired hands for the first year, but when money got tight, I had to let them go. I did what I could alone, but it was not enough. I am strong, but I am not strong enough to do the work of 3 men. I'd say keeping it going this long by yourself shows considerable strength," Vincent said, looking at her with something like admiration. "How old were you when they died?" 20. "I am 22 now." He nodded slowly. "That's a heavy burden for anyone, let alone someone so young and alone." They walked back to the house in the long shadows of late afternoon. Olivia felt wrung out, empty of tears finally, just numb with acceptance. Tomorrow someone else would own this land. Tomorrow she would have to figure out what came next, though she had no idea what that would be. Perhaps she could find work as a seamstress in town, or a cook at the hotel. The thought of living in a small rented room after the expansive freedom of the farm made her chest tight. "Thank you for the tour," Vincent said when they reached the house. "I know it could not have been easy." "Will you bid on it tomorrow?" Olivia asked, not sure why it mattered but wanting to know. "I am considering it seriously." He settled his hat back on his head. "Where will you go tonight?" "The Hendersons, my neighbors to the east, said I could stay with them." "That's good." "You should not be alone." He mounted his horse with easy grace, then looked down at her. "Miss Morrison, I hope things work out better for you than they seem now. You deserve better than what life has handed you." The unexpected kindness in his words brought fresh tears to her eyes, but she blinked them back. "Thank you, Mr. Nash." She watched him ride away until he disappeared down the dusty road, then turned to finish loading the few belongings she had left. By sunset, she took one final walk through the empty house, trailing her fingers along the door frames her father had hung, the windowsills her mother had painted pale blue. The house echoed with memories and ghosts. Clover pulled the borrowed wagon slowly toward the Henderson farm as night fell. Olivia did not look back. She could not bear to. The Hendersons welcomed her with warm sympathy and a hot meal she could barely taste. Martha Henderson fussed over her like a mother hen, insisting she eat something, while Tom Henderson spoke quietly about how it was a shame what the banks could do to honest folk. Their kindness made her feel worse somehow, highlighting what she had lost. That night, Olivia lay in the Hendersons' spare room, staring at the ceiling and wondering what would become of her. She had no family left, limited skills beyond farming, and virtually no money. The small amount she might get from selling clover and the wagon would not last long. The future stretched before her, dark and uncertain. Morning came too quickly. Olivia dressed in her best remaining dress, a faded blue cotton that had been her mother's and braided her hair neatly. If she was going to watch her home sold to strangers, she would do it with dignity. The auction was to be held at noon on the front steps of the First National Bank. By 11:30, a crowd had gathered. Olivia stood at the back, trying to be inconspicuous, but she felt the eyes on her, the whispered comments. Everyone in Sheridan knew her story. In a town of barely 800 souls, tragedy was public property. She saw several local ranchers she recognized, men with established spreads looking to expand. There was Samuel Pritchard, who owned the largest cattle operation in the county. There was Douglas Weaver, whose family had been in Wyoming since before it was a territory. Men with money and power, ready to buy her family's legacy at a bargain price. Then she saw Vincent Nash, standing off to one side, his dark eyes scanning the crowd. When he spotted her, he gave a small nod of acknowledgement that she returned. So he had been serious about bidding. She was not sure how she felt about that. At least he had seemed respectful of the land, but the thought of anyone else owning it still hurt like a physical wound. The bank president, Herbert Whitmore, stepped up onto the makeshift platform at exactly noon. He was a portly man with mutton-chop whiskers and an air of self-importance that had always irritated Olivia. He had been the one to deny her final, desperate plea for an extension on her loan. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming," Whitmore began in his pompous voice. "We are here today to auction the property known as the Morrison Farm, 160 acres of prime land with house, barn, and outbuildings. The starting bid is set at $2,000. "Do I hear 2,000? 2,000, Samuel Pritchard called immediately. 2,200, Douglas Weaver countered. The bidding went quickly, the price climbing as Olivia watched with a sick feeling in her stomach. 2,500, 2,800, 3,000. Each increase was another reminder that she had lost everything. That money she could never possess was being casually tossed around by men to whom it meant little. 3,000, Pritchard said firmly. "That's my final offer." There was a pause. Whitmore looked around eagerly. "Do I hear 3,200? Vincent Nash stepped forward. $4,000. A murmur ran through the crowd. It was an absurd overpayment, well above the property's value, even accounting for improvements. Pritchard scowled but shook his head, refusing to go higher. Weaver had already dropped out. 4,000 going once, Whitmore said, his eyes gleaming with greed at the unexpected windfall. Going twice, sold to Mr. Vincent Nash for $4,000. Olivia felt her knees weaken. It was done. The farm belonged to a stranger now, a man she had met only yesterday. She turned to slip away through the crowd before the tears could start again, but a hand touched her elbow gently. "Miss Morrison," Vincent said, "could you wait a moment? I need to settle the paperwork, but I'd like to speak with you after." "I do not know what we would have to say to each other, Mr. Nash. The property is yours now. Congratulations." She heard the bitterness in her own voice but could not contain it. "Please," he said simply. "Just a few minutes of your time." Something in his tone made her pause. "Very well." She stood in the shade of the bank's awning while Vincent went inside with Whitmore to complete the transaction. The crowd dispersed, some people casting curious glances her way, others studiously avoiding looking at her. She felt like a ghost haunting her own life. It seemed to take forever, but finally Vincent emerged from the bank, carrying a leather document case. He looked around and gestured for her to follow him to a quieter spot away from the main street. Confused and emotionally exhausted, Olivia followed. They stopped in the small park beside the church, where cottonwood trees provided dappled shade. Vincent turned to face her, and she was struck again by the kindness in his eyes, so at odds with the hard lines of his face. "Miss Morrison," "I want you to know something about me," he began. "I came out west 5 years ago with nothing but the clothes on my back and a stubborn refusal to give up. I worked every job there was, saved every penny. I got lucky with some cattle investments, made some good choices, and built up a stake. But I never forgot what it was like to have nothing, to feel powerless against forces bigger than yourself." Olivia listened, not understanding where this was leading but caught by the raw honesty in his words. "Yesterday, when I saw you crying on that porch, it reminded me of my own mother, years ago when we lost our home in Missouri. I was just a boy, but I remember the look on her face. That same hopeless grief I saw on yours. We moved from place to place after that, never settling, never secure. She died before I could make enough to buy her a home of her own." His voice had roughened with emotion, and Olivia felt her heart crack open a little wider. "I bought your farm, Miss Morrison, but not for myself." He opened the document case and pulled out a sheaf of papers. "I bought it for you." Olivia stared at him, not comprehending. "I do not understand." Vincent held out the papers. "This is the deed to the Morrison farm. I'm giving it to you. The property is yours, free and clear, with no debt attached." The world seemed to tilt sideways. Olivia grabbed the back of the nearby bench to steady herself. "That is not possible. You cannot just give someone a farm." "I can, and I am." He pressed the papers into her hands. "Consider it a gift or an investment in justice or whatever makes you comfortable accepting it. But that land was your parents' dream and you've bled for it. It should be yours." Olivia looked down at the deed, seeing her name written in official script. Olivia Morrison, sole owner. The papers blurred as tears filled her eyes for what felt like the 100th time in 2 days. But these were different tears. "I cannot accept this," she whispered, even as her hands clutched the precious documents. "It is too much. $4,000. I could never repay you." "I'm not asking you to repay me." "But why? You do not even know me." Vincent was quiet for a moment, his dark eyes searching her face. "Let's just say I believe some things are more important than money, and maybe because when I saw you yesterday, something in me recognized something in you. Strength, determination, the will to keep going even when everything seems lost. Those are rare qualities, Miss Morrison. Your land should not be taken from you because of circumstances beyond your control." Olivia sank onto the bench, her legs finally giving out. She stared at the deed in her hands, unable to fully process what had just happened. Her farm, still hers. The crushing weight that had pressed on her chest for months suddenly lifted and she could breathe again. "I do not know what to say," she managed. Vincent sat down beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "You don't have to say anything. Just promise me you will not give up on that place. Make it thrive the way your parents would have wanted." "I promise," Olivia said, and now the tears were flowing freely. Tears of relief and gratitude and overwhelming emotion. "Mr. Nash, I cannot believe what you have done. This is the most generous, incredible thing anyone has ever done for me. For anyone. How can I ever thank you?" "No thanks necessary." He stood, settling his hat on his head. "I'm staying at the boarding house on 3rd Street for a few days before I head north. If you need anything, any help getting settled back in, you let me know." He started to walk away, but Olivia found herself speaking before she could think better of it. "Mr. Nash, wait. Would you let me cook you dinner? Tomorrow evening at the farm. It is the least I can do." Vincent turned back, and a slow smile crossed his face, transforming it from merely handsome to genuinely warm. "I'd be honored, Miss Morrison." After he left, Olivia sat in the park for a long while, holding the deed and trying to absorb the miraculous turn her life had taken. She thought of her parents, buried on the hillside, and whispered a prayer of thanks that their dream had not died with them. The farm was hers again, She had a future again. That afternoon, she returned to the farmhouse with a lightness in her step that had been absent for 2 years. The foreclosure notice still hung on the door, and she took great satisfaction in tearing it down and throwing it in the fire pit. She spent the rest of the day cleaning, scrubbing away the dust and despair, throwing open windows to let fresh air chase out the ghosts of grief. By evening, the house felt alive again. Olivia stood in the kitchen, looking around at her mother's dishes on the shelves, her father's coat still hanging by the door, and felt something she had not felt in so long she barely recognized it. Hope. The next morning, she hitched Clover to the wagon and drove into town, returning the wagon to the Hendersons with profuse thanks and the whole remarkable story. Martha Henderson cried and hugged her, declaring it a miracle. Tom Henderson was more practical, insisting on coming out to help with the heavy work of getting the farm operational again. "You will need to get those fields watered before the wheat dies completely," he said. "And the north fence looked like it needed mending when I rode past last week. I will bring my boys out tomorrow, and we will help you get things right." Olivia accepted gratefully, knowing pride had no place when survival was at stake. With the deed secured in the bank's safe deposit box and a small amount of money left from selling some of her mother's jewelry, she bought supplies for dinner. A chicken, fresh vegetables, flour for bread, coffee, and sugar. She had not cooked for someone else in so long, and she found herself wanting everything to be perfect. Back at the farm, she spent the afternoon preparing the meal and continuing to restore order to the house. As sunset approached, she changed into her best dress, a green calico that brought out the color of her eyes, and pinned her hair up carefully. She told herself it was just gratitude she felt, just wanting to look presentable for the man who had saved everything she held dear. But when she heard the sound of hoofbeats in the yard and her heart began to race, she knew it was more complicated than that. Vincent knocked politely despite the open door, and Olivia called for him to come in. He had cleaned up too, she noticed, wearing a pressed white shirt and dark trousers, his hair still damp from washing. He held his hat in his hands and looked around the house with interest. "Place looks different from when I saw it 2 days ago," he said. "You have been working hard." "It needed care. I had let things slide while I was so worried about losing it. Funny how much energy you have when you know your work matters again." Olivia gestured to the table, set with her mother's good dishes. "Please sit. Dinner is ready." They sat across from each other at the wooden table her father had built 30 years ago, and Olivia served the roasted chicken with vegetables and fresh bread. For a few minutes, they ate in comfortable silence, but then Vincent began asking questions about the farm, about her plans, about what she needed most urgently. "The wheat needs water desperately," Olivia said. "Tom Henderson is bringing his sons tomorrow to help repair the irrigation channels my father built. If we can get water flowing again in the next few days, I might save half the crop." "What about after harvest? Do you have hands lined up to help bring it in?" Olivia's expression clouded. "That is a problem I have not solved yet. The harvest is a month away and I have no money to hire help." Vincent cut a piece of chicken thoughtfully. "I could help with that. Mr. Nash, you have already done more than anyone could expect. I cannot ask you for anything else." "You are not asking, I'm offering. I've got nothing particular pulling me north urgently. I could stay on for a month or so, help with the harvest. You could pay me in room and board." Olivia stared at him. "You would do that, but you said you were looking to settle somewhere, find your own land." "I am. But this land needs help right now, and I'm not opposed to staying in this area. Sheridan seems like a decent town. The country is good, and the company would be pleasant." That last comment, said with a slight smile, made Olivia's cheeks warm. She looked down at her plate, suddenly flustered. I do not know what to say. That would be incredibly helpful, but I do not want you to feel obligated. I don't feel obligated, I feel inclined. There's a difference. Vincent leaned back in his chair. Besides, I like the work. I'd go crazy sitting idle in a boarding house for weeks with nothing to do. Then yes, I would be grateful for your help, Olivia said. There is a room upstairs that was for hired hands when we had them. It is clean and has a good bed. Sounds perfect. They talked late into the evening, the conversation flowing easily once Olivia relaxed. Vincent told her about his travels, the places he had seen, the different kinds of work he had done. He had been a ranch hand, a freight hauler, a guard for cattle drives, even spent a winter logging in Montana. He was 28, she learned, and had been on his own since he was 16, when his mother died and his stepfather made it clear he was no longer welcome. I'm sorry, Olivia said softly. That must have been so hard. It taught me to survive. And it taught me that family is not always blood. Sometimes it is the people who show up when you need them most. His eyes held hers across the table, and something passed between them, an understanding that needed no words. Olivia found herself telling him things she had not spoken aloud to anyone. How lonely the last 2 years had been. How she sometimes talked to her parents' graves just to hear a voice, even her own. How she had lain awake at night terrified of ending up destitute, alone in a world that was not kind to women without protection or means. You are not alone anymore, Vincent said quietly. Even when I move on eventually, you will have neighbors, friends. People know you now, know what you have endured. They will help when you need it. People knew before, but they could not help. Everyone is struggling in their own way. True enough. But you are not facing complete ruin anymore. That changes things. You can breathe again, make plans that are not just about immediate survival. He was right, and Olivia felt the truth of it settling into her bones. She could plan. She could dream again. The realization was intoxicating. When Vincent finally said he should head back to town, Olivia walked him out to his horse. The night was clear and cool, the stars brilliant overhead. Wyoming's sky had a quality unlike anywhere else, vast and endless, making a person feel both small and part of something infinite. Thank you for dinner, Vincent said, mounting his horse. Best meal I've had in months. Thank you for everything, Olivia replied, the words inadequate for what she felt. When will you come back? Day after tomorrow. That will give you time to work with the Hendersons tomorrow, and I will bring my things and settle in. That sounds good. He looked down at her from his horse, and in the moonlight his face was all shadows and angles. Good night, Olivia. It was the first time he had used her given name, and it sent a little thrill through her. Good night, Vincent. She watched him ride away, then stood in the yard for a long time, looking up at the stars and feeling like her life had suddenly become something she no longer recognized. 2 days ago, she had been crying over the loss of everything. Now she had it all back, plus something unexpected. A connection to another person that felt significant in ways she was not ready to examine too closely. The next day brought Tom Henderson and his 2 sons, sturdy boys of 16 and 18, who worked without complaint under the hot sun. They cleared the irrigation channels of debris and silt, repaired breaks in the carefully constructed system, and by afternoon had water flowing back to the parched wheat fields. Olivia worked alongside them, grateful for the distraction of physical labor that kept her mind from drifting constantly to thoughts of Vincent Nash. Martha Henderson arrived at midday with a basket of food for lunch, and she studied Olivia with shrewd, knowing eyes. You look different, she observed, lighter somehow. I feel like I can breathe again, Olivia admitted. I did not realize how much weight I was carrying until it was gone. Tom said that Nash Fellow is staying on to help with harvest. That is generous of him. Yes, very generous. Olivia busied herself with slicing the bread Martha had brought, avoiding her neighbor's perceptive gaze. He is a handsome man, Martha continued, undeterred. Seems decent too from what people in town say. Quiet, polite, pays his bills promptly. Martha, Olivia said with a laugh, I have known him 3 days. Sometimes 3 days is enough to see what kind of person someone is. Your mother knew she would marry your father after 2 days. Did she ever tell you that? Olivia smiled at the memory. She did. Father proposed after a week and they were married a month later. Sometimes you just know. Martha patted her hand. I am just saying, keep your heart open. You have been closed off for so long, protecting yourself. But maybe now you can let yourself feel again. The word stayed with Olivia after the Hendersons left that afternoon. Could she let herself feel again? The grief of losing her parents had been so overwhelming that she had shut down emotionally just to survive. And beyond grief, there had been fear, constant and gnawing. But now, with the farm secure and the immediate crisis past, perhaps there was space for other feelings. Vincent arrived mid-morning 2 days later, leading a pack horse loaded with his belongings. Olivia came out to meet him, wiping flour from her hands. She had been baking bread, and the house smelled of yeast and warmth. Welcome, she said, suddenly shy. Let me show you to your room and you can get settled. She led him upstairs to the hired hand's room, which she had cleaned thoroughly and furnished with fresh linens. It was simple but comfortable, with a bed, a dresser, a chair, and a window that looked out over the fields. This is perfect, Vincent said, setting his pack down. Better than most places I have stayed. I am glad you think so. Come down when you are ready, and I will show you around the property properly. Everything you need to know if you are going to help run it. For the rest of the day, they walked the farm together. Olivia explained her father's systems, the rotation he had used for crops, the best pastures for grazing, the quirks of the land that you learned only by living on it. Vincent listened and asked intelligent questions, making suggestions that showed his experience without being dismissive of what she knew. Your father was smart, he said as they stood by the irrigation channels, watching water flow toward the wheat fields. This system is well designed. I have seen professional operations that were not as well thought out. He learned through trial and error. We lost a whole crop our 3rd year here because he had not accounted for the spring runoff properly. After that, he spent 2 years redesigning everything. Must have been a hard 2 years. They were, but Father always said the land would teach you if you paid attention. You just had to be willing to learn from your mistakes. Vincent looked at her with respect. He sounds like he was a good man. He was. Both my parents were good people. They deserved longer lives than they got. The influenza took a lot of good people that year. I was in Montana, but we heard about how bad it hit Wyoming. They walked back to the house as the sun lowered toward the mountains. A comfortable rhythm developed quickly. Vincent proved to be an excellent worker, strong and tireless, but also thoughtful about how he approached tasks. He fixed the north fence that Tom Henderson had mentioned, repaired loose boards on the barn, and spent long hours in the fields assessing the wheat and planning for harvest. Olivia found herself watching him sometimes when she thought he was not looking. The way he moved with easy confidence, the way he treated the land with respect, the gentleness with which he handled Clover and the other horse, a gelding named Rusty that he had bought in town. He was good company too, talking easily over meals, sharing stories that made her laugh, listening when she needed to talk through problems or plans. A week passed. Then 2. The wheat began to recover with regular watering, and though they would not have a full crop, it would be enough to see Olivia through the winter with money left over for seed and supplies. Vincent worked from dawn to dusk, refusing any payment beyond room and board, though Olivia tried repeatedly to give him something. "You gave me back my life," she argued one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "Let me give you something in return. You feed me 3 excellent meals a day and give me a comfortable place to sleep. That is payment enough." Vincent stretched his long legs out, looking relaxed and content. "Besides, I like it here. It has been a long time since I felt settled anywhere." "You could stay," Olivia said impulsively, then immediately regretted it. "I mean past harvest, if you wanted. There is always work on a farm, and I could not pay much, but room and board and a share of the profits maybe, if you are not in a hurry to find your own place." Vincent turned to look at her, his expression unreadable in the dimming light. "Would you want that, me staying longer?" Olivia's heart was pounding, but she made herself meet his eyes. "Yes, yes, I would want that." Something shifted in his face, a softening around his eyes, a hint of a smile. "Then I will think about it seriously." That night, Olivia lay in her bed thinking about what Martha Henderson had said. "Keep your heart open." Was that what was happening? Was her heart opening to Vincent Nash, this man who had appeared in her life like an answer to a prayer she had not known how to form? She examined her feelings carefully, trying to be honest with herself. She was grateful to him, certainly. But it was more than gratitude that made her look forward to seeing him each morning. That made her take extra care with her appearance. That made her heart lift when she heard his footsteps on the porch. She enjoyed his company in a way that went beyond simple appreciation for his help. She liked his laugh, his quiet competence, the way he looked at her sometimes like she was someone worth noticing. Was this love? Or the beginning of it? Olivia had never been in love before. There had been a boy when she was 17, a rancher's son who had courted her briefly before moving away with his family. But that had been a shallow thing, more infatuation than anything real. What she felt for Vincent was different, deeper, more substantial. The days grew shorter as July turned to August. The wheat ripened, turning from green to gold, and they began preparations for harvest. Vincent hired 2 men from town to help, reliable workers recommended by Tom Henderson, and Olivia found herself managing a small crew, something she had not done since before her parents died. Working alongside Vincent during the harvest felt natural, like they had been doing it together for years rather than weeks. They developed an unspoken communication, anticipating what the other needed, moving in sync through the long days of hard labor. The 2 hired men noticed, sharing knowing looks that made Olivia blush when she caught them. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, Vincent suggested they take a break before dinner. "Come on," he said. "I want to show you something." Curious, Olivia followed him as he walked toward the hillside where her parents were buried. Her first instinct was to tense, protective of that sacred space, but Vincent moved with respectful purpose. He did not go to the graves themselves, but stopped at a spot just beyond, where the land sloped down toward the fields and the view stretched for miles. "I come up here sometimes in the evenings," he said. "Hope you do not mind. It is the best view on the property." Olivia looked out over the land her father had claimed, the fields they had planted together as a family, the house her mother had made into a home. From here, she could see it all, bathed in the golden light of sunset. "It is beautiful," she said softly. "I wanted you to see it like this," Vincent said, "to remember why it matters, why fighting for it was worth it." She turned to look at him, and the expression on his face made her breath catch. He was looking at her, not the view, and in his eyes was something that made her heart race. "Olivia," he said quietly, "these past weeks with you have been the best I have known in longer than I can remember. I want you to know that before I say anything else." "Vincent," she began, but he shook his head gently. "Let me finish, please." I am not good with words, so I need to get this out while I have the courage." He took a deep breath. "I came to Sheridan looking to settle down, to find a place to call home. I thought I was looking for land, for property. But what I found was you. And I realize now that home is not about the place. It is about the person." Olivia felt tears spring to her eyes, but they were good tears, joyful tears. Vincent continued, his voice rough with emotion. "I know we have not known each other long. I know I am probably rushing things. But I also know my own heart, and it is telling me that you are what I have been searching for without knowing it. I am in love with you, Olivia Morrison. I love your strength, your kindness, your determination. I love the way you laugh and the way you care for this land, and the way you make me want to be better than I am." "Vincent," Olivia whispered, her voice breaking. "You do not have to say anything back," he said quickly. "I just needed you to know. I will stay and help with the harvest regardless, and if you want me to leave after, I will. But if you think you could ever feel the same way, if you think we might have a chance at something real, I would like to try. I would like to court you properly, if you will let me." Olivia stepped closer to him, close enough to see the vulnerability in his eyes, the fear and hope mixed together. "You said you are not good with words," she said softly, "but those were the most beautiful words anyone has ever said to me." "Olivia," he breathed. "I love you too," she said, the words coming easily because they were true. "I think I started falling in love with you the moment you handed me that deed and gave me back my future. But it is more than gratitude, so much more. You make me happy, Vincent. You make me feel alive again. I did not realize how much of myself I had locked away until you came along and helped me find it again." Vincent reached out slowly, giving her time to pull back if she wanted, but Olivia did not want to pull back. She wanted to move forward toward him, toward this new future that had appeared like a miracle. His hands cupped her face gently, reverently, and when he kissed her, it was soft and sweet and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. Vincent rested his forehead against hers. "I was so nervous," he admitted. "I thought you might think I was crazy declaring love after such a short time." "Maybe we are both crazy," Olivia said with a laugh, "but it feels right. Does that not count for something? It counts for everything." They walked back to the house hand in hand as the stars began to appear overhead. Olivia felt like she was floating, her heart so full it might burst. In the span of a few weeks, she had gone from losing everything to gaining more than she had ever dreamed possible. Not just her farm, but love. Real, deep, genuine love with a man who saw her for who she truly was and loved her anyway. The harvest finished successfully 2 weeks later. The yield was not as large as in good years, but it was respectable, and the grain broker in Sheridan gave Olivia a fair price. After paying the hired hands and buying supplies for winter, she had money left over, actual savings. The feeling was almost foreign after so long living on the knife's edge of destitution. Vincent's courtship was proper and sweet. He treated Olivia with a combination of respect and affection that made her feel cherished. They took walks in the evening, talked for hours on the porch, stole kisses when they thought no one was looking. The neighbors noticed, of course, and the gossip spread through Sheridan that Olivia Morrison and Vincent Nash were courting. Most people were happy for them. A few raised eyebrows at the speed of the relationship, but Martha Henderson defended them fiercely, pointing out that when you knew, you knew, and there was no sense wasting time on needless propriety when two people had clearly found their match. In September, as the weather began to turn cool and the leaves changed color in the cottonwoods, Vincent proposed officially. They were at their spot on the hillside, watching the sunset, and he got down on one knee with a simple gold band he had bought from the jeweler in town. "Olivia Morrison," he said, Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? I promise to love you, protect you, and stand by your side through whatever comes. I promise to care for this land like it was my own, to honor your parents' memory and the legacy they built. I promise to make you happy or die trying." Olivia pulled him to his feet, laughing and crying at the same time. Yes, yes, of course, yes. They were married in late October in the small church in Sheridan, with half the town in attendance. Olivia wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved, and carried wildflowers that Vincent had picked that morning. Tom Henderson stood up for Vincent, and Martha Henderson cried happy tears as she witnessed for Olivia. The ceremony was simple but beautiful. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Vincent kissed her with such tender joy that Olivia felt her heart might burst from happiness. This man, this wonderful man who had saved her farm and then stolen her heart, was now her husband, her partner, her family. The reception was held at the farm, with neighbors bringing food and music and well wishes. They danced in the barn, which had been swept clean and decorated with lanterns. Vincent held Olivia close as they swayed to the fiddle music, and she rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Happy," he murmured into her hair. "Beyond measure," she replied. That night, after the last guests had left and they were finally alone, Vincent carried Olivia over the threshold of what was now their home. Their wedding night was tender and sweet, a gentle exploration that spoke of love and respect and promise. Olivia had been nervous, knowing so little about the physical side of marriage, but Vincent was patient and kind, making sure she felt safe and cherished. Afterward, lying in the darkness with Vincent's arms around her, Olivia thought about the strange path that had brought them to this moment. If the bank had not foreclosed, if Vincent had not been riding through Sheridan at that exact time, if he had not been the kind of man to help a stranger, none of this would have happened. It seemed like fate or providence or maybe just extraordinary luck. "What are you thinking?" Vincent asked sleepily. "That I am the luckiest woman in Wyoming. I am the lucky one." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "I found home. The years that followed were good ones." Vincent proved to be an excellent farmer, bringing new ideas and techniques that increased yields and improved efficiency. Together, they expanded the operation, buying additional land from a neighbor who wanted to retire, increasing their cattle herd and diversifying crops. The farm prospered in ways Olivia's parents would have been proud to see. But more than the material success, it was the joy of building a life together that made Olivia happiest. She and Vincent were partners in every sense, making decisions together, supporting each other through hard times, celebrating the good times. They laughed together, worked together, dreamed together. In the spring of 1884, Olivia discovered she was pregnant. The news filled both of them with excitement and a little fear. Childbirth was dangerous on the frontier, and they both knew women who had died bringing life into the world. But Olivia was young and healthy, and when her time came in December, with Martha Henderson and the doctor from town attending, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Thomas Vincent Nash, after Tom Henderson and his father, but called him Tommy. Vincent was besotted with his son from the first moment, holding the tiny bundle with such careful awe that Olivia fell in love with him all over again. Watching her strong, capable husband become so tender and gentle with their baby made her heart swell. "He is perfect," Vincent whispered, staring at Tommy's small face. "How did we make something so perfect?" "We had good help," Olivia said with a tired smile. "And good luck." Tommy was a happy baby, easy-going and content. As he grew into a toddler, he showed signs of having his father's calm temperament and his mother's determination. He loved the farm, loved the animals, loved following Vincent around and copying everything he did. In 1886, their daughter was born. They named her Margaret Rose, after both their mothers, but called her Maggie. She was more spirited than Tommy, demanding and loud and full of personality from birth. Vincent joked that she would keep them on their toes, and he was right. The house that had felt so empty after Olivia's parents died was now full of life and noise and love. Children's laughter rang out across the fields. Toys cluttered the floors. The rooms that had echoed with loneliness now burst with family. Olivia sometimes stood in the doorway and just watched her family, overwhelmed with gratitude. Vincent playing with the children, making them giggle with his exaggerated stories. Tommy helping his father with small chores, so serious and proud. Maggie toddling after them, determined not to be left behind. This was what her parents had dreamed of when they built this farm, she thought. Generations growing up on this land, building their lives here, putting down roots so deep they could never be torn up. One evening in 1888, when Tommy was 4 and Maggie 2, Olivia and Vincent sat on the porch watching the sunset. The children were asleep inside, worn out from a day of playing. It was rare to have quiet moments anymore, and they savored them when they came. "Do you ever think about that day we met?" Olivia asked, leaning against Vincent's shoulder. "All the time," he said. "I thank God for it regularly. I was so lost, so hopeless, I thought my life was over. Mine was just beginning, though I did not know it yet." Vincent wrapped his arm around her. "Best investment I ever made, that farm. You did not buy it as an investment. No, but that is what it turned out to be. Invested $4,000 and got a whole life in return. Wife, children, home, purpose. Not a bad return." Olivia smiled. "When you put it that way, I suppose you got a bargain. The best bargain in the history of Wyoming territory." He kissed the top of her head. "I love you, Olivia Nash. I love you too." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to deep purple. Olivia thought about all the seasons they had seen from this porch. The hard winter of their first year together, when Vincent proved his worth by keeping the livestock alive through brutal cold. The wet spring that flooded the south pasture, but brought bumper crops. The dry summer they survived by working twice as hard and helping each other through discouragement. The beautiful fall of their first harvest as a married couple. Each season had brought challenges and joys, but they had faced everything together. That was the key, Olivia realized. Not that life had become easy, because it had not. Farming was hard work, and the elements were always unpredictable. But having someone to share the burden with, someone who loved you and believed in you and stood by your side, made even the hard times bearable. "What are you thinking about?" Vincent asked. "How lucky we are, how unlikely this all was, how easily things could have gone differently. But they did not. We found each other at exactly the right moment. That has to mean something." "It means everything," Olivia said softly. In 1890, Olivia discovered she was pregnant again. This time, she felt more confident, having been through it twice before. Their third child, a girl they named Sarah June, was born in the spring of 1891. She was a quiet baby, observant and calm, content to watch her older siblings play. With 3 children and a growing farm operation, life was busier than ever. Vincent hired permanent help, 2 good men who lived in a newly built bunkhouse and worked alongside him daily. The farm had become one of the most successful in the county, known for quality wheat and healthy cattle. But success did not change who Vincent and Olivia were at their core. They remained generous with their neighbors, helping when others faced hardships the way they had been helped. They remembered what it felt like to struggle, to fear losing everything. and they made sure to extend kindness wherever they could. When the bank tried to foreclose on the Henderson farm in 1892, Vincent and Olivia bought the debt and gave Tom and Martha time to pay it back without interest. When the schoolteacher fell ill and could not work for months, Olivia organized the community to support her. When drought hit hard in 1893, they shared their water rights with neighbors whose wells ran dry. "You are doing what I did for you," Vincent said one evening after they had delivered supplies to a struggling family. "We are doing what you did for me," Olivia corrected. "We are in this together, remember. What is mine is yours." "What is ours?" Vincent said with a smile. "I like the sound of that." The children grew quickly, as children do. Tommy became a capable helper on the farm, learning everything his father could teach him. Maggie was spirited and independent, more interested in horses than housework, much to Martha Henderson's amusement. Sarah was the peacemaker, gentle and sweet, always trying to smooth over conflicts between her siblings. Olivia loved watching Vincent with their children. He was patient and kind but firm when necessary, teaching them the value of hard work and honesty. He told them stories about their grandparents, making sure they knew the legacy they were inheriting. And he showed them every day, through his actions and his words, what it meant to love and respect their mother. In 1895, on a crisp October day much like the one when they had married, Olivia and Vincent celebrated their 10th anniversary. The children had made decorations with Martha Henderson's help, and the house was festooned with paper chains and wildflowers. A cake sat proudly on the kitchen table, slightly lopsided but made with love. After dinner, while the children played in the yard, Vincent led Olivia out to their spot on the hillside. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, and the wheat fields below swayed in the evening breeze. 10 years, Vincent said, shaking his head in wonder. "Seems like yesterday and forever at the same time." "I know what you mean," Olivia said. "Sometimes I still cannot believe how lucky I was that you rode by that day. Luck had nothing to do with it. That was fate, providence, whatever you want to call it. We were meant to find each other." They stood together, watching their land, their home, their legacy spread out before them. 3 children played in the yard below. The house they had built a life in stood solid and welcoming. The fields that had almost been lost now thrived under their care. "You remember what you promised when you proposed?" Olivia asked. "Every word. To love you, protect you, stand by your side. To care for the land and honor your parents' memory. To make you happy or die trying." "You have kept every promise," Olivia said, her voice thick with emotion. "You have made me happier than I ever thought possible." Vincent pulled her close, and they stood wrapped in each other's arms as the sun sank below the mountains. "The best decision I ever made was buying that farm," he murmured. "The second best was giving it to you, but the very best was when you agreed to be my wife." "I would choose you again," Olivia said. "Every time, every life, I would choose you. And I would find you again, every time." They kissed as the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from nothing. The years continued to pass, bringing more changes and growth. In 1897, they built an addition onto the house, adding more bedrooms and a larger kitchen. The farm continued to prosper, even through the economic difficulties that plagued much of the country. Vincent's good management and Olivia's careful bookkeeping kept them stable when others struggled. Tommy grew into a serious young man, clearly destined to take over the farm one day. He had his father's way with animals and his mother's head for business. Maggie surprised everyone by falling in love with a young banker's son from Sheridan, a quiet, scholarly boy who adored her adventurous spirit. Sarah remained their gentle soul, helping her mother around the house and showing a talent for gardening. In the summer of 1900, as the new century dawned, Olivia sat on the porch and took stock of her life. She was 40 years old, still healthy and strong. Her husband loved her as much as the day they married, maybe more. Her children were growing into fine adults. Her farm, the land her parents had claimed and nearly lost, thrived under her and Vincent's care. It was everything she had never dared to dream during those dark days after her parents died, during the desperate struggle to keep from losing it all. She thought of herself at 22, crying on the porch as strangers nailed up the foreclosure notice, certain her life was over, if only she could go back and tell that broken girl what was coming. A cowboy with kind eyes and a generous heart, a love that would sustain her through everything. Children and prosperity and joy beyond measure. A happily ever after that seemed too good to be true but was real nonetheless. Vincent came out and sat beside her, as he had done countless evenings over the years. He took her hand without speaking, their fingers intertwining automatically. They did not need words anymore. 18 years together had given them a language deeper than speech. "What are you thinking about?" he finally asked. "Everything," Olivia said. "The past, the present, the future. How grateful I am, how blessed." "We have been lucky," Vincent agreed. "More than lucky. We have been purposeful. We chose to build this life together. We chose to love each other, to work hard, to raise our children right. That is more than luck." "You are right, as usual." Vincent smiled at her. "It was the best choice I ever made." "We have a good life," Vincent Nash. "The best life," Olivia Nash. "The very best." They sat together as night fell over the Wyoming plains, two people who had saved each other in different ways, who had built a legacy of love and hard work and family. The farmhouse behind them glowed with lamplight and the sound of their children's voices. The land stretched out around them, fertile and productive, cared for and cherished. This was home. This was happiness. This was the life they had chosen and built together, brick by brick, season by season, year by year. And it was everything. The farm continued to pass from season to season, the rhythm of planting and harvest marking time's passage. In 1902, Tommy married a sweet girl named Elizabeth from a neighboring ranch, and Vincent and Olivia became grandparents when their first grandchild, a boy named Robert, was born the following year. The farmhouse that had once felt so empty now rang with even more laughter and life. Maggie married her banker in a beautiful ceremony in 1903, and though they moved to town, she visited often, unable to stay away from the horses and open spaces she loved. Sarah, in no hurry to marry, discovered a talent for teaching and began working at the local school, though she still lived at home and helped with the farm. Vincent's hair turned gray at the temples, giving him a distinguished look that Olivia teased him about. Her own blonde hair showed streaks of silver, which Vincent said made her look like she was crowned with moonlight. They aged together gracefully, their bodies showing the wear of hard work but their spirits remaining strong. In 1905, on a warm spring evening, Olivia and Vincent walked up to their special spot on the hillside. It had become a tradition over the years, this pilgrimage to the place where Vincent had first told her he loved her. They came here for important moments, for quiet reflection, for remembering what mattered most. 20 years, Olivia said softly, looking out over the land. "Can you believe it has been 20 years since you bought this farm?" 23 since we married, Vincent added. "Best 23 years of my life." "Mine too." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The wheat fields below were green with new growth, promising a good harvest. The cattle grazed peacefully in the pastures. Smoke rose from the farmhouse chimney where Sarah was making dinner. "You ever wonder what would have happened if you had not stopped that day?" Olivia asked. "If you had just ridden past." "I used to," Vincent admitted. "Early on, I would think about it sometimes, but not anymore. Because I know in my bones that I was supposed to stop, that everything in my life led me to that moment, to you. I was meant to find you, Olivia. We were meant to build this life together." "I believe that too," Olivia said. She leaned against her husband and he wrapped his arms around her as he had done thousands of times before. "Thank you, Vincent, for everything, for saving my farm, for loving me, for giving me this beautiful life." "Thank you for letting me stay," Vincent said softly, "for loving me back, for making me part of your family, your legacy. I was a drifter before I met you. You gave me roots." "We gave each other everything we needed," Olivia corrected. "That is what love does." As the sun finally sank below the horizon, they walked back down the hill hand in hand. The farmhouse windows glowed welcomingly. They could see Sarah moving around the kitchen, and in the distance, Tommy's house showed lights as well. His young family settling in for the evening. This was their legacy, Olivia thought. Not just the land, though that was important. Not just the buildings and livestock and crops. Their true legacy was love, family, perseverance, and kindness. They had taken a terrible situation and transformed it into something beautiful. They had built a life that honored those who came before while creating a foundation for those who would come after. Vincent held the door open for her, and Olivia walked into the warm, welcoming house. The smell of dinner filled the air, and Sarah smiled at them from the stove. "Perfect timing," she said. "Food is ready." They sat down together at the same wooden table where they had shared their first meal, where they had eaten countless dinners, where they had celebrated holidays and birthdays and ordinary days that turned out to be extraordinary simply because they were together. This table, this house, this land, this life, it was all theirs. Earned through love and labor, protected through determination, enriched through family. After dinner, after Sarah had gone to bed and the house was quiet, Vincent and Olivia sat together on the porch one final time. The night was clear and cool, the stars brilliant overhead. "I have been thinking," Vincent said. "Maybe it is time we started planning for Tommy to take over more of the operation. He is ready and we are not getting any younger." "Are you saying you want to retire?" Olivia asked with amusement. "Not retire exactly, but maybe step back a little. Spend more time with the grandchildren, travel a bit, see some of the country together. We have worked hard for over 20 years. Maybe we have earned a little rest." Olivia considered this. The idea of not having the weight of the farm entirely on their shoulders was appealing. Tommy was more than capable, and it would be good for him to take on more responsibility. "I think that is a good idea," she said. "We could travel in the fall after harvest. Maybe visit the coast, see the ocean. I have always wanted to see the ocean." "Then we will do it," Vincent said decisively. "This fall we will take a trip, just the two of us." "A late honeymoon, 23 years delayed," Olivia laughed. "I like that idea very much." They made their plans over the following weeks, exciting and a little nervous about the prospect of leaving the farm for an extended period. But Tommy assured them he could handle everything, and Elizabeth proved to be a capable partner. The younger generation was ready to step up. In October of 1905, Vincent and Olivia boarded a train heading west. It was Olivia's first time on a train, and she pressed her face to the window like a child, marveling at how quickly the landscape changed. They traveled through mountains and forests, across deserts and valleys, until finally they reached the California coast. The ocean took Olivia's breath away. The endless expanse of blue, the sound of waves crashing against rocks, the salt-tinged air, All of it was magnificent and overwhelming. She and Vincent walked along the beach hand in hand, collecting shells, watching the sunset over the water, feeling young and adventurous. "It is beautiful," Olivia said, "but it is not home." "No," Vincent agreed. "Home is back in Wyoming on that farm we built together." They returned after a month away, refreshed and grateful for the adventure but happy to be back where they belonged. The farm welcomed them back, and so did their family. Little Robert had grown noticeably in their absence, and there was news that Maggie was expecting her first child. Life settled back into its comfortable rhythm. Vincent and Olivia did step back from the day-to-day operations, letting Tommy and Elizabeth take the lead. It felt strange at first, being less directly involved but also freeing. They had more time for each other, more time for their grandchildren, more time to simply enjoy the life they had built. In 1908, Olivia turned 50. Vincent threw her a surprise party, inviting everyone they knew. The barn was decorated with lanterns and ribbons, and people came from all over the county to celebrate. Tom and Martha Henderson were there, both showing their age but still vital and happy. Neighbors who had been helped by Vincent and Olivia's generosity over the years came to pay their respects. Their children and grandchildren surrounded them with love. As Olivia stood in the center of the barn, looking around at all the people who had enriched her life, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. She thought of the scared, grieving girl she had been at 20, certain that her life was over. She could not have imagined this future then, could not have dreamed that such happiness was possible. Vincent came to stand beside her, slipping his arm around her waist. "Happy birthday," he said softly. "Thank you," Olivia replied. "For this party, for everything. For the last 26 years. For the rest of our lives. Always," Vincent promised. "Always and forever." The years continued to roll by like the changing seasons. More grandchildren arrived, filling the farmhouse and Tommy's house with noise and joy. Vincent and Olivia became the matriarch and patriarch of an extended family, dispensing wisdom and love in equal measure. They grew old together, their bodies slowing but their minds remaining sharp. They took their walks to the hillside less frequently as arthritis made the climb difficult, but they still went for special occasions. Their anniversary, the first day of spring, the last harvest of fall. In 1915, on a beautiful autumn day, Vincent and Olivia celebrated their 30-year anniversary. Their children and grandchildren gathered at the farm for a celebration. Tommy and Elizabeth had 4 children now. Maggie and her husband had 3. Sarah had eventually married a widower with 2 children of her own, giving Olivia and Vincent an even larger family to love. The party was joyful and loud, full of food and music and laughter. But eventually, as the sun began to set, Vincent took Olivia's hand and led her away from the crowd. They made their way slowly up the familiar hillside path, their steps careful but determined. At their special spot, they stood looking out over the land that had been the foundation of their life together. The wheat fields lay harvested and peaceful, the cattle grazed contentedly. The farmhouses, both the original and Tommy's newer one, stood solid and welcoming, smoke rising from their chimneys. 30 years, Olivia said wonderingly. Where did they go? Into love, Vincent said simply. Into family. Into this land and this life. They went exactly where they were supposed to go. Olivia leaned against him, and he held her close. They were both in their mid-60s now, their hair completely gray, their faces lined with age and experience. But when Olivia looked at Vincent, she still saw the handsome cowboy who had stopped to help a crying girl. And when Vincent looked at Olivia, he still saw the strong, beautiful woman who had captured his heart at first sight. "If I could go back," Olivia said softly, Back to that terrible day when I thought I had lost everything. Knowing what I know now, I would not change a thing. Because losing the farm was what brought you to me. Every moment of pain was worth it to get to this. I would not change anything either, Vincent said. Except maybe I would have found you sooner, so we could have had even more years together. We have had enough years to fill several lifetimes with love, Olivia said. I have no regrets, Vincent, not a single one. Neither do I. They stood together as the sun set on their 30th anniversary. Two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built something lasting and beautiful from the ashes of despair. Below them, they could hear the sounds of their family, their legacy, celebrating and laughing and living the life that Vincent and Olivia had made possible. The farmhouse that had once stood empty and foreclosed now overflowed with life and love. The land that had nearly been lost now thrived, passed down to the next generation. The legacy of that day in 1882, when a cowboy stopped to help a crying girl, rippled outward through time, affecting everyone it touched. As darkness fell and the stars emerged, Vincent and Olivia made their way slowly back down the hill. Their children and grandchildren welcomed them with hugs and smiles, pulling them into the warmth and light of the celebration. This was what it was all about, Olivia thought. This love, this family, this beautiful, complicated, messy, wonderful life they had created together. She looked at Vincent across the crowded room, and he smiled at her, that same warm smile that had captured her heart 30 years ago. "I love you," he mouthed silently. "I love you too," she mouthed back. And that, Olivia realized, was the real story. Not the farm, not the foreclosure, not even the dramatic rescue. The real story was the love that had grown from that moment, the partnership they had built, the family they had created. The real story was choosing each other every day for 30 years. The real story was this: two people who had saved each other and built a life worth living. As the party continued around them, with their grandchildren playing and their children talking and their friends celebrating, Olivia felt a deep sense of peace settle over her. This was home. This was happiness. This was love. And it was everything she had never dared to hope for, given to her by a cowboy with a generous heart who had stopped to help when she needed it most. The farmhouse stood solid and strong, filled with light and laughter and love, a testament to everything they had built together. And it would stand for generations to come, sheltering the family they had created, the legacy they had built on a foundation of love and second chances. This was their happily ever after, earned through faith and hard work and choosing love even when it seemed impossible. This was the life that began on that day in 1882, when Olivia Morrison was crying over her foreclosed farm, until a cowboy named Vincent Nash bought it and gave her the deed, along with his heart. And they lived that beautiful life together, surrounded by love and family, for many more years to come, their story becoming legend in Sheridan, Wyoming. A reminder that sometimes the darkest moments lead to the brightest futures, and that love, when it is real and true, can transform everything.